Good afternoon, everyone. You could take your seats. Hi, my name is Kelly Stoll, and I work with URS Corporation. We're the contractor that the FCC is going to be working with for this effort. A couple of housekeeping items. I want to make sure, I believe everyone has signed in at the table here in the front. If you have not, please just take a couple minutes to do that. There's a registration card. On the bottom there's a box if you'd like to make a comment today. If you could check that so that we know how many folks will be commenting, and we'll call folks in the order in which they signed in. And that the meeting is being recorded as well as broadcast over the web. So just for your information there. We are here to talk about the Programmatic Environmental Assessment for the FCC's Antenna Structure Registration Program. We are going to provide you a brief presentation, and then we're going to open the floor for questions and answers, and then open the floor for formal comments following that period. At this point, I'd like to introduce our two speakers. Aaron Goldschmidt, who is the Assistant Chief for NEPA Policy for the Spectrum and Competition Policy Division of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau here at the FCC, and Dr. Jeff Lindblad, who's with URS, and he will be the project manager on this environmental assessment. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Aaron.
Thanks, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. The FCC was established in 1934 and has the responsibility of regulating interstate and international communications. Among its statutory responsibilities, the FCC has the authority to require the painting and lighting of antenna structures that may pose a hazard to air navigation. The ASR program is the mechanism by which the FCC meets this obligation. Under the ASR program, owners of antenna structures that are taller than 200 feet above ground level or that may interfere with the flight path of a nearby airport must register those structures with the FCC. The antenna structure owner must obtain painting and lighting specifications from the Federal Aviation Administration and include those specifications in its registration prior to construction. Through ASR, FCC maintains a database of communication structures that may affect aviation safety. The FCC complies with NEPA by requiring applicants to review their proposed actions for environmental consequence. The slide indicates where the FCC's NEPA rules can be found at 47 CFR Part 1, Sections 1.1301 through 1.1319. The rules require the applicant to consider the environmental effects of a proposed tower and to file an environmental assessment if the proposed tower may have a significant effect on the environment. The FCC, with the assistance of its environmental consultant URS, is preparing a Programmatic Environmental Assessment, or PEA, of the ASR program. The PEA is being undertaken because the Court of Appeals in American Bird Conservancy versus FCC held that registered towers may have a significant environmental effect on migratory birds. The PEA will determine if the ASR program has a significant environmental effect and is focused on migratory birds and threatened and endangered species. I'm now going to turn it over to Jeff to discuss some of the details of the PEA. Jeff?
Thank you, Aaron. And thank all of you for attending the meeting today and for providing comments on the PEA as we go through the development stage of the document. The PEA will include several components such as a description of the purpose and need of the ASR program, the alternatives considered, and a description of the affected environment. The PEA will evaluate potential impacts to resources from the no action alternative, that is, leaving the program as it is, and alternatives to the program, revisions to the program, which will be developed through the evaluation of existing science and public input. As Aaron noted, the primary resources of concern include migratory birds and threatened endangered species. However, all resources will be addressed in the PEA. We'll be evaluating direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts of the alternatives. Our analyses will use existing documentation and studies. We'll look at adverse and beneficial impacts of the alternatives. We'll examine the significance of any impacts in terms of their context and intensity. In addition, we're going to be addressing mitigation measures that would avoid and minimize impacts to resources. We'll look at the importance of various tower feature designs in producing impacts, such as the location of the towers within the landscape, the height of the towers, the use of any supporting systems such as guy wires, and lighting such as steady or flashing lights, as well as colors. Stakeholders will be engaged throughout the process, such as through the scoping meeting we're holding today and the ones that will be, the two that we'll be holding next week. We'll also be holding public meetings after the draft PEA is issued next year. Next slide. This slide shows the major PEA milestones and their targeted dates. The public scoping comments are due January 14th of next year, and we are targeting preparation of the draft PEA in the spring of next year. At that time, the FCC will issue a public notice announcing the availability of the draft for public comment, and public meetings will be held during that time to receive comments on the draft. Once the comments are received and processed, we'll evaluate them and take them into consideration as we prepare the final PEA. We expect to issue a final PEA in the summer of next year, at which time either a finding of no significant impact or FONSI will be issued, or it will be determined that there may be significant environmental impacts that would require preparation of a programmatic environmental impact statement, which would include further evaluations and analyses. Now I'm going to turn the program back over to Kelly, and she'll walk you through the next portions of the meeting.
Quickly, this is the website where for the programmatic environmental assessment. In addition, you have a couple of handouts, one of which is the scoping meeting guide. This, it's got the agenda on the top. It also has the various ways that you can submit your comments. Both the mailing address, the overnight address, this website, as well as the electronic comments. This is a screen capture of the website, and your comments need to make sure that the docket numbers are indicated in this section, and then the appropriate fields filled out, and then any attachments down here in the documents are attached, just like you're sending an email. If you have questions on that, we'll be around after the meeting and can answer that for you as well. At this point, I'm going to open the floor for questions. We'll be happy to take any before the comments portion of our program today. So, if there are any questions, do we have any from our folks online? Oh, go ahead. Okay.
Oops. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay. Not in any particular order, and I'm Caroline Kennedy with Defenders of Wildlife, and I'm also asking these questions on behalf of National Audubon Society and American Bird Conservancy. The first one is the comments that you've made about the existing towers. Are you going to be looking in the EA at projected build out of the broadband, or is it just the current on the ground situation?
We'll be looking at taking into account expected additional towers being built.
Okay. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that we commonly hear that 4 to 5 million birds are killed every year from communication towers. But the issue needs to be looked at more specifically in terms of the hundreds of types of migratory birds. And there is some recent study that shows that communication towers are having an annual estimated mortality of several percent, and these birds are already declining for a number of reasons. So if you could comment a little bit about the specificity that you'll be looking at in terms of species rather than general total kill of birds.
Yes, we're beginning our data analysis right now, and like I said, we're going to be using existing documentation and studies, but certainly we'll look at not only overall bird populations, but look at, to the extent that we can, at specific species.
Caroline, just throwing it back at you, are these studies in the record, or are you planning to put them into the record?
The one study in particular that I'm thinking of is not currently in the record, but I have spoken with the authors, and they will be submitting that study before January 14th.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's one other question I have is, in terms of looking at existing studies, are you going to be limiting that to a certain peer-reviewed or published documents, or are you going to be looking at everything? And then what ornithological experts will you be even just discussing the issue with?
I don't think we're going to limit our data analysis only to peer-reviewed scientific literature. I think we'll expand it a bit, maybe even to the gray literature. We'll coordinate with the regulatory agencies for Fish and Wildlife Service, particularly on that one. But yeah, we'll reach out to the known experts in the field, certainly. We have an avian expert on our team, a couple of them. One is Richard Podolsky, and he's pretty well known in the ornithological community. So.
I have more questions, but I don't know if I should let other people go now, or do you want me to just ask them all?
I don't think anybody else had any other questions. Do you have any from our online participants?
Okay.
No. Okay.
Related to that last question, there are a lot of EAs and environmental assessments that have been done in regards to wind energy impacts on birds. Will you be looking at that as well?
I think that would be part, yes.
Okay.
Yes, the answer is yes.
One of the questions we have is, I'm not that familiar with your company. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the types of NEPA analysis that you've done, and are you planning on consulting with CEQ about the process at all?
First question, URS is a publicly traded company. It's about 45,000 people, and we have been practicing NEPA and consulting in NEPA since its inception. Currently, we have contracts with the Army Corps of Engineers, with NASA, with Federal Highway, several DHS, several agencies providing NEPA support. In terms of, what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
Consulting with the
CEQ. Consulting with CEQ. We'll discuss that with FCC in terms of maybe doing that.
One other question I have is, since the FCC has been looking at this issue for a number of years, you have quite an extensive docket or dockets. How have you, and we've been told that all of that information is part of the record, how are you going to go back and look at what's been submitted to the FCC? Have you started doing that already, or is that going to be able to be incorporated into your time frame of a spring release of the?
Yeah, we've already begun that. When we were authorized to proceed on the contract, we've been doing that for the last several months. Yeah.
Caroline, did you have anything else? Just go through.
I think that's more or less it. Thank you.
Okay. Did anyone else have any other questions they'd like to ask at this time? Okay. At this point, we're going to open the floor for comments. As I mentioned, there were some folks that indicated that they were interested in providing comments this afternoon. Caroline, did you have comments in addition to your questions that you wanted to provide?
I don't think so. I'm going to skip it for now.
Okay.
If it's okay.
Jason Rylander from the Defenders of Defenders of Wildlife.
I actually think I'll defer to my comments to written comments that we'll be submitting later for the record.
Okay, thank you. And the last comment we have is, or commenter, I should say, is Joelle Gary. Did I say that correctly? Gary?
I have slides, so would you like to be here or here?
Either, whichever you prefer.
Can I ask you to do the slides for me? Thank you. Well, it's always great to talk with this group, and it's also great to see how much progress we've made and where we've come to this point. And I just wanted to emphasize today that this is an issue that we've heard the number 4 to 5 million brought up again and again, and this is 4 to 5 million birds per year, and it involves hundreds of species of birds, as Carolyn mentioned. And most of these species are declining in population size. We understand that, and it's not all due to communication towers. There are many issues. But we also know that these collisions have been occurring for decades. Next slide, please. So, and in the past we used to say 4 to 50 million birds killed per year, and this is still a possibility. We have to refine these numbers further, but regardless, I think most people are comfortable with 4 to 5 million birds per year. And again, hundreds of species of night migrating birds that are already declining, and these collisions have been occurring for decades. Longer than I've been alive, these collisions have been occurring. And so we can do the math, 4 to 5 million per year for decades. And the research in recent years with many collaborators, including many people in this room, and I thank all of you, indebted forever. Next slide, please. Recent years have really brought about a lot of current information that we can use. Some of the original research was done by Stoddard, and this speaks to the longevity of this issue in our conservation world. This was around the Aldo Leopold time, and he was conducting research on this very same issue. So next slide, please. But we have been able to look at, and this is a slide of the FCC database of the towers, and it gives us an understanding of how these are spread throughout North America, just America alone. But we also know that the towers go beyond America into Canada, North America, South America, all over the world. And the United States has an opportunity to provide precedents to make a difference on this issue. And we do have current research. Next slide, please. This is some research that we've conducted in Michigan, and many of you have seen these slides before, but what it shows is what we now understand to be true, that guide towers that are tall, over 1,000 feet tall, are involved in significantly more avian fatalities than those towers that are shorter. The tall bar on your far right, those are tall towers over 1,000 feet tall that are supported by guy wires. The bar in the middle are those towers that are 470 feet tall, also supported by guy wires. And that small little bar on your far left, those are unguided towers, also medium in height, about 470 feet tall. So this tells us that these taller towers with guy wires involved in significantly more avian fatalities, 5 times more than their counterparts at 470 feet tall. We also can see here that towers with guy wires, if we just look at the 2 bars on the left that are about the same height, towers with guy wires are involved in 16 times more fatalities than towers without guy wires. Okay? And so these are peer-reviewed data that will be published in the Journal of Wildlife Management in the next several months. And that is for people who aren't involved in conservation research, that is one of the top wildlife journals in the world. So next slide, please. We also learned that towers with different lighting systems are involved in various levels of fatalities. If we focus in, this includes towers with tall towers way over on the right and unguided towers way over on the left. So that's a trend I just showed you. And those towers in between that are circled with green, those are the towers that are all the same height with guy wires, but just have different lighting systems. Okay, and before we try to read all of the text along the bottom of the screen there, let me digest it for you. And that is those towers with L810 steady burning lights. Okay, when you hear L810, that means lights that don't blink. Those towers that include a lighting system with L810s, steady burning, non-blinking lights, they are involved in significantly more avian fatalities, 3.5 times more avian fatalities. And that is something that we can use. That is something that we can look at the towers that are on the landscape now. We can't make them shorter. We can't take off their guy wires. And we know that we believe that they are killing 4 to 5 million birds in America alone every year. But this is something we can use. We can change the lighting systems with very little economic impact on the industry and significantly reduce avian collisions, as much as 70%. Okay, next slide, please. We knew that this was the case with medium towers, so we said, well, what about those tall towers that are automatically involved in significantly more avian fatalities? Does it still work? And we found almost the exact same results. For those towers who have steady burning or L810 lights on them, again, involved in 60 to 68% more fatalities. Okay, this is critical information. So by turning off your steady burning L810s or by having the tower a white strobe lit tower, we can significantly reduce those. And the great thing that we were just talking with Bill Sill about earlier is that the FAA has been involved in some conspicuity studies, and you don't have to try to spell that, it's okay. It's and don't say conspicuity, it's conspicuity, and this is their effort to see if we do turn off those steady burning red lights, are we still able to maintain pilot safety or aviator safety? Next slide, please. Because in their circular, which is where they detail the requirements or recommendations, which then become requirements for a licensed tower, they are specific about which heights of towers require what type of light marking and lighting. And what they have found, and I was able to encourage and be a part of some of this research to help them understand what would be in the best interest of avian conservation as they assessed these towers for pilot safety. We were able to, and I just spoke with Jim Patterson of the FAA this morning, and he is actually currently, as we sit here, working on language to revise the circular to allow for towers above 351 feet, so 351 and above, to have the L810 lights extinguished. And from my understanding of most communication towers, if not all, that requires a drive to the tower, entry into the building associated with that tower, and essentially flipping a switch. I'm sure it's more complicated than that. But essentially that's what it is. Not only will these towers then reduce their energy costs and their maintenance costs, but that individual tower will immediately reduce the number of avian collisions. This is not a DDT situation where we have to go decades before we see an impact. It is immediate. Within minutes, it reduces the attraction of migratory birds. And that is highly valuable. Okay, underneath, below, I should say, 351 feet, so 350 and below, they are pushing at this point, the FAA that is, to ask that those L810s be programmed to flash in concert with the flashing L864s, or the current lights on the tower, red lights that flash. And so this would allow the birds, again, to not be drawn into a steady burning light. This might require a little bit more work time on the part of tower operators to change this lighting system, but I'm not sure that it would require any additional financial investment beyond that. So that gives an opportunity for the tower industry to actually be in congruence with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and at very little economic cost, and actually a reduction in energy costs and maintenance. And this is, if you could go to the next slide, please. This is a time where we have a lot of information that can help us resolve this issue that has been here for decades. 4 to 5 million birds, probably more earlier on when bird populations were higher. 4 to 5 million birds per year in the U.S. alone. And Canada has also suggested that they will follow suit with the FAA circular and change their lights as well, and it will possibly have a continental effect. Okay, next slide. So we're hoping that with this, with progress that we could make here, that we will see a dramatic reduction in avian collisions, and this process is part of that. And the PEIS, Programmatic EIS, would provide more detailed, higher resolution information on the number of birds that are actually colliding, so we can help refine that number of 4 to 5 million or 4 to 50 million. And we can also understand the collision risk in different regions. Where are we seeing increased numbers of birds colliding with towers? And not only in different regions, but also in different locations. Are those towers near wetlands or near wildlife reserves a higher risk to birds than other towers are? And it will help us with prioritization. As Carolyn mentioned, we have hundreds of different species. Not all of them are as common as the birds we see at our feeders. Many of them are quite rare, like the Kirtland's warbler we have in Michigan, where I'm from. We have a diversity of population levels, and many of these I would say all of these night migrating birds are attracted into some of these towers. So by understanding the issue at a larger scale, a Programmatic EIS will provide some of that information, and now we have the tools that are of very little financial impact to the industry that will allow us to actually resolve this issue to a large extent. So thank you.
Joelle, may I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
With respect to the modification to the circular, I mean, I imagine you don't know the time frame of when this might come out, but I guess my bigger question is, will tower owners have to file to change their lighting to do this in every instance? Or can there be mass waivers? Or
that is a very good question, and I think that we all probably should work together on that. I think the FAA understands the burden that does place on the industry, and therefore the speed at which it will take place. And the conservation groups, I would tend to think, want this to happen quickly. Like I said, as soon as the lights are changed, we see an impact, but we have to make it, in my opinion, as easy as we can to have those changes occur, because we don't want it to get tied up in administration. I don't know the answer to that, but I understand the value. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there, at this point, those are the only folks? Yes. Sure.
By way of background, I'm Bill Sill, and I'm here today on behalf of the Infrastructure Coalition, which consists of CTIA, the Wireless Association, the National Association of Broadcasters, NAB, the National Association of Tower Erectors, NATE, and PCIA, the Wireless Infrastructure Association. And I have just one question. Prior to the January 14th comment period, does the FCC intend to make public the methodology and assumptions that will be used by the consultant? And the reason I'm asking this question is I think that it would really help guide us, and I think other commenters as well, in their comments.
At this point, I do not think we are intending to do that.
Is there? I appreciate the answer. I guess the question I would ask is if If we don't have that information before we file our comments on the 14th, they wouldn't be as focused as they might otherwise be. So we would urge that you think about that and possibly come to a different conclusion. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions, comments, statements? Okay. Well, did I hear somebody? Okay. I guess with that, we can adjourn. A couple closing notes. Again, the ways to submit are here on this handout. If you have any questions regarding that, please feel free to ask us. Also, everyone was handed an evaluation form when they came in. This primarily has to do with the meeting itself, logistics, handouts, posters, things of that nature. So if you would take a few minutes, read it, check some boxes. Not too painful, I hope. And that is all I have. So thank everyone for coming, and thank Aaron and Jeff for their presentations. And that's it.